Early in the morning of the incident, Sister Abhaya woke up at 4 a.m. to study. While going to get water from the kitchen, she discovered Father Thomas Codor, Father Jose Puthur Kafal, and Sister Sephi in an indecent situation. Fearing that they would be exposed, they attacked her. Sister Sephi hit the victim on the head with an axe. They then dragged her to a well and threw her in to create a fake suicide scene. A young nun left her room at 4 a.m. to get a drink of water. Hours later, her body was found in the well behind the convent, with a gunshot wound to the head. Police said it was a suicide. But the blood, unusual markings, and strange behavior have raised questions. Who killed her? And why? The girl's name was Sister Abhaya, 21 years old. Her death became the center of a 28-year-long case, with a series of cover-ups, doctored evidence, and an unexpected witness, a thief who sneaked into the convent at night. And from there, the dark side behind the convent walls gradually revealed. Kottayam, a small peaceful town in the southern Indian state of Kerala, is famous for its ancient churches, quiet monasteries, and large Catholic community. Among them, the St. Pius X Convent is located in a spacious green campus, providing shelter and education for dozens of female students, including those who have taken vows and chosen the religious life. In that peaceful and orderly atmosphere, Sister Abhaya, whose real name is Bina Thomas, is known as a gentle, introverted young nun, devoted to studying and practicing. She was born in 1971, coming from a poor but disciplined Catholic family. As the only daughter in the family, since childhood she dreamed of becoming a nun, dedicating her life to faith and community. Her parents, who were working farmers, were very proud when their daughter was chosen to enter the convent and study at the pre-degree college under the convent. In the eyes of those around her, Abhaya was always calm, modest, and strict with herself. She did not talk much, but was always polite, studied hard, and especially never complained about anything. She often wakes up early, goes to church, studies, and helps in the kitchen or laundry. Those who have met Abhaya say, her eyes always have a peaceful look as if she was born to belong to that sacred place. But it was in this seemingly safe place between the monastery walls, between the prayers and the church bells, that she witnessed her tragic death. A death that, for many years after, people still tried to cover up with two words: suicide. At the St. Pius X Convent, daily life passes in order and discipline. The nuns and students living in the dormitories follow a strict schedule, wake up at 5 a.m., pray, have breakfast, then go to school, work, and end the day with evening prayers. Sister Abhaya is one of the most exemplary female students. She is studying in the pre-university program, equivalent to grades 1112, and is about to take her final exams. She is a good student, especially fond of chemistry and English. The nights before exams, she often stays up late and wakes up early to study extra. Her roommate said that Abhaya usually sets her alarm for 3:30 to 4 a.m. She gets out of bed quietly, avoiding disturbing others, then goes to the hallway or to the kitchen to wash her face, get some water, and then returns to study. On the evening of March 26th, the day before the murder, everything went on as usual. Abhaya and her friends had dinner at the cafeteria, talked about the upcoming exam, then went to bed early to prepare for the next day's classes. No one expected that this would be the last time they saw her alive. There was no sign that she was sad, stressed, or had any signs of depression. There was no suicide note, no last words. She still smiled slightly, greeted the sisters in the convent before turning off the lights to go to sleep. What caused a young nun who had always lived a pure life, without conflict or grudges, to die a mysterious death, with a wound on her head and her body thrown into a well at night? To find the answer, we need to go back to the key moment, 4 a.m. on March 27, 1992. According to the testimony of people in the monastery, the time from 3:30 to 4:30 a.m. is when the kitchen and hallway are still dark, with only a few dimly lit oil lamps. But for Abhaya, that is the familiar time when she often goes down to get water or wash her face to be more alert before studying. That morning, as she did every day, she went down to the kitchen on the ground floor. Several other nuns later reported seeing her in the hallway. One remembered smiling and nodding as she passed. But no one saw her again, and Sister Abhaya never returned to her room. Around 5:30 a.m., a few of the other nuns began to wake up. When they checked the kitchen, they found an uncapped water bottle, spilled water on the floor, and one of Sister Abhaya's slippers lying on the cold stone floor. That worried them. Abhaya had never been so careless. The uneasiness spread quickly. A group of nuns spread out to search the convent grounds. When they approached the well behind a deep well, which was rarely visited, they discovered the remaining sandal. And then, a brave person looked down into the well. Sister Abhaya's body lay motionless under the cold black water, her hair loose, her head stained with blood. Just hours ago, she was still laughing and talking with her friends. Now her body floated in the well like an abandoned shadow. The local police were immediately called. The incident was initially reported as an accident or suicide. But the signs at the scene told a completely different story. The truth about Sister Abhaya's death was buried for years. But after nearly 3 decades of investigation, the testimony of an unlikely witness, an anonymous thief named Raju, revealed what really happened that fateful morning. According to Raju, on the night of March 26th to 27th, 1992, he sneaked into the St. Pius X convent with the intention of stealing copper wires from the lightning protection system on the roof. While climbing up, he accidentally witnessed a strange scene. 3 people sneaked into the kitchen of Father Thomas Couture, Father Jose Puthrakyle, and Sister Sephi. It was the unexpected. 2 priests and a nun appeared in the middle of the night in a girls-only area. Raju hid in the shadows watching. He made no sound, but what he saw next haunted him for the rest of his life. Around 4 a.m., Sister Abhaya went into the kitchen to get some water, as was her habit. In the dim yellow light, she suddenly discovered the 3 people in an ambiguous situation. Shocked, she turned and ran away. But she never had a chance to escape. In a panic and fear of being discovered, Sister Sephi quickly grabbed an axe used to chop coconuts in the kitchen, chased after Abhaya, and hit her hard on the head from behind. She collapsed, unconscious. Immediately after, Father Couture and Father Jose together dragged her body through the dark corridor to the well behind and threw her body down to destroy the evidence. No pleas, no chance of survival. The 21-year-old girl, devoted to her faith, was murdered by her own holy men. Raju, who witnessed the whole thing, did not dare to report it to the police for fear of being arrested for theft. But years later, when the case was hushed up and the truth was distorted, he decided to speak up, and his testimony completely changed the investigation. Around 6 a.m. on March 27, 1992, the convent began to wake up. A few nuns passing by the kitchen discovered something unusual. The cap of a water bottle was left open. Water was spilled on the floor, and a single slipper lying nearby belonged to Sister Abhaya. No one answered her call. She was nowhere to be found. Worry quickly spread throughout the dormitory. At around 7 a.m., a nun passing by the old well behind the row of houses discovered Abhaya's second sandal. Feeling something was wrong, she peered down into the well. And then, almost to the point of silence, Sister Abhaya's body floated in the deep water, her black hair spread out like a shadow. There was no movement, no cry for help, no hope. Immediately, the monastery called the fire department, local police, and ambulance. The first to arrive was Officer V.V. Augustine, who together with the fire brigade, pulled the body from the bottom of the well. She was dead, her body was cold. There was a cut on her head, but it was recorded as drowning. A photographer was called to the scene to take pictures for the investigation. The pictures later became living evidence. The wound on her head, the bruise on her wrist, and the look of panic still in her eyes as if she had witnessed something horrifying before she died. However, instead of opening a criminal investigation, the death was quickly classified as a suicide on the grounds that Sister Abhaya had jumped into the well for personal reasons. The convent did not request a further investigation. The police did not raise further questions. In less than 48 hours, the body was buried, the clothes were destroyed, and the diary was burned. But the question remains, why would a young nun, preparing for exams, with no signs of mental instability, choose to die at night? And why were all traces erased so quickly? On the morning of March 27, 1992, after the body was recovered from the well, the police took Sister Abhaya's body to the morgue for an autopsy. The initial official report stated the cause of death as drowning, although the victim had a deep circular wound on his head, crushing the posterior cranium, which should have raised suspicions. More surprisingly, none of the forensic records detailed these injuries, nor were there any clear notes on the time of death or signs of struggle or resistance. What appeared in the forensic report was sketchy and vague. Not only that, the victim's clothes were destroyed immediately afterwards, and the personal diary where moods, relationships, and worries could be recorded was also burned by people in the monastery with the reason of preserving the honor of the deceased. In addition, crime scene photos taken by a photographer at the request of Officer Augustine, including clear photos of the head wound and bruises on the arms and shoulders, mysteriously disappeared from the investigation file. Just one small detail overlooked in the early stages of the head injury opened a chain of serious errors that lasted for many years. It is worth noting that this was not an individual mistake, but rather a series of organized actions aimed at misleading the investigation. During that time, while the Abhaya family was shocked and did not understand what was happening, the nuns in the convent were asked to be quiet, say nothing more, and public opinion was gradually lulled by the label suicide. But the truth, no matter how hidden, has a way of surfacing like the corpse at the bottom of the well. And the first light on the case only appeared when a group of social activists and independent, investigative journalists began to speak out. Soon after the case was hastily closed under the name of suicide, many doubts began to arise in the community. A social activist group led by Joman Puffin Paroko, a well-known human rights activist, formed the Justice for Sister Abhaya Committee, demanding that the investigation be reopened. Under pressure from the public and the media, in April 1992, the case was transferred from the local police to the Kerala State Crime Branch. However, after months of investigation, the unit also concluded that there was no evidence to suggest that this was a case of murder, continuing to maintain its original assessment, suicide. Under pressure from the public and the media, in April 1992, the case was transferred from the local police to the Kerala State Crime Branch. However, after months of investigation, the unit also concluded that there was no evidence to suggest that this was a case of murder, continuing to maintain its original assessment, suicide. The CBI then conducted a series of simulation tests, using dolls of Abhaya's size and weight thrown down the well in various positions, to determine whether it was possible to fall by herself. The conclusion: it was impossible for Sister Abhaya to accidentally fall or jump without leaving any traces of struggle, or without making a sound. By 1996, after years of collecting evidence, the CBI had reached an official conclusion. This was a murder case. However, the perpetrator had not yet been identified. The court rejected this conclusion and requested further investigation. From 1997 to 2005, 3 different CBI investigation teams took turns, but all were stuck. Many witnesses changed their testimony. Some were threatened. Until 2007, an unexpected witness came forward. Adaka Rayu, a thief who was present at the scene the night of the crime, decided to break his silence. His testimony, which seemed worthless, was the key to unlocking the whole truth that had been buried for 15 years. In 2008, after verifying the testimony of witness Abhaya, combined with circumstantial evidence and additional witnesses, the CBI officially announced the three main suspects in the Sister Abhaya case. Father Thomas Couture, a priest and lecturer at the school where Abhaya studied. Father Jose Puthrakale, who had close ties with the convent. Sister Sephi, a nun who lived in the same dormitory as the victim. The arrests were made shortly after the three completed a narco test, a procedure used to test neurological responses in an unconscious state. Video recordings of the test were later leaked and aired on local television, revealing shocking details about the three defendants' inappropriate behavior and their reactions when caught by Abhaya. The day the arrest warrant was issued, the Catholic community in Kerala was shaken. Two priests and a nun, who were seen as representatives of faith and purity, were accused of murdering a fellow priest at night and then staging a fake crime scene. Under pressure from the church, believers, and the media, the CBI persisted in making the arrests. All three were taken to the investigation office in Kochi for separate interrogation. Here, the attitudes of the three arrested were very different. Father Jose appeared confident, but dodged questions about his presence at the scene. After a few days in custody, the court granted bail to all three, causing public outrage. But for the CBI, the most important thing at that time was that they had a basis for further investigation, and the most important testimony from the person who had been considered the most worthless, the thief Abhaya, remained steadfast as a pillar of truth. The interrogation of the three suspects was conducted at the CBI office in Kochi. Investigators separated all three and interrogated them independently for several days using psychological methods that alternated between soft and hard. The first to show signs of wavering was Sister Sephi. After more than 48 hours of silence, she began to fall into a state of restlessness, insomnia, anxiety, and kept repeating the phrase, "I didn't mean to." When asked about her presence in the kitchen in the early morning of March 27th, she did not deny it. But when asked if she had attacked Abhaya, she simply bowed her head. Father Thomas Couture appeared calmer. He denied any involvement, saying that he was in his room that night and did not know anything about Abhaya's death until the morning. But when comparing his testimony with the evidence from the narco test, the investigator pointed out a clear contradiction. In the video, he admitted to being present in the kitchen, along with Sister Sephi and Father Jose. Father Jose Puthrakale was the most resistant, even accusing the CBI of setting him up and forcing him to confess. However, when shown the narco test video in which he showed panic and blurted out Abhaya's name right after being asked about the night of the murder, he was speechless. But the most important testimony still came from outside witness Abhaya. During several cross-examination sessions, Rayu recounted the details. He had sneaked into the monastery to steal copper wire, hidden on the roof, witnessed 3 people entering the kitchen at dawn, and then heard a loud bang, a short scream, and then silence. Rayu admitted that he had been a criminal, but also said, "I cannot stay silent when I see a person being killed." Despite being questioned by his defense attorney about his criminal past, Rayu did not deny it. He even added, "They asked me to take the blame. They promised me money, a house, and even education for my children. I refused. Because the dead woman was a nun, and I could not live if I betrayed what I had seen." This testimony, despite coming from a thief, was assessed by the investigation board as consistent, logical, and consistent with objective evidence. And so, each piece of the truth gradually came together. A case that was once buried under the label of suicide now has witnesses, indirect confessions, and photographic evidence from narco test, waiting only for the legal system to make a final judgment. After nearly 2 decades of investigation, with countless delays, changes in teams, and lost evidence, the CBI entered the most important stage, completing the prosecution case. They began by compiling all the data. Witness Adaka Rayu's testimony was consistent with the timeline and circumstances of the case. Rayu also passed psychological and cross-examination tests. Photos of the crime scene taken by the original photographer, some of which were recovered after many years, showed a head wound and bruises on the victim's wrist and shoulder area. This is evidence that completely contradicts the suicide theory. Although the original copy of the narco test of the three suspects was edited dozens of times, after being restored by technology experts from the Center for Development of Digital Image Technology, CDIT, a significant part of the original content was restored. The recordings show Father Katur admitted to being in the kitchen. Sister Sephi was confused when asked about the heavy object in her hand. Father Jose mentioned the girl's scream. Through the history of contact between the three defendants, through Sister Sephi's old diary and several witnesses in the convent, the investigator established an unusual relationship between Sister Sephi and Father Katur, described as intimate like husband and wife. The unreasonable appearance of two priests in the nunnery at dawn seriously violated the monastery's rules and was not reported or recorded in the activity diary. The CBI compiled all the evidence, completed the charge sheet, and sent it to the Kerala High Court. In it, the formal charges against Father Thomas Katur and Sister Sephi were premeditated murder, destruction of evidence and crime scene, obstructing the investigation. Father Jose Puthrakale, however, was cleared of the charges during the trial due to lack of direct evidence, although he was still considered to be indirectly involved. With a file of over 500 pages, the charge sheet became one of the most eye-catching legal documents in the state of Kerala in the past decade. All eyes are on the upcoming trial where justice, after nearly 3 decades, will be delivered. The Sister Abhaya trial officially began in 2010 at the special CBI court in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. It was one of the most high-profile trials in Indian judicial history, not only because of the seriousness of the case, but also because the 3 accused were all high-ranking religious figures. Father Thomas Katur and Sister Sephi were charged with murder under Section 302 of the Indian Penal Code, along with charges of destruction of evidence and conspiracy to conceal the truth. Adaka Rayu, a key witness, heavily protected by the court. Former and new CBI investigators. Forensic experts from CDIT on narco test video editing analysis. Witnesses who lived in the monastery in 1992. The defense repeatedly argued that the testimony of a thief was unreliable, that the video evidence was doctored, and that the case was too old to have a fair trial. But the judges argued that Rayu had persisted in his testimony for more than 10 years, despite being detained, bribed, and threatened. Technological analysis showed that the editing of the videotape was deliberate, but still did not erase the implied evidence. The statements from Sister Sephi and Father Katur in narco test were investigatively instructive. Finally, on December 22, 2020, nearly 28 years after the incident, the court sentenced Father Thomas Katur and Sister Sephi to life imprisonment, along with a fine of 500,000 rupees each. Father Jose Puthrakale was acquitted due to lack of direct evidence. The court affirmed that this was a case of premeditated murder and strongly condemned the defendants for using their religious positions to conceal their crimes, seriously affecting justice and public trust. The verdict was greeted with tears and anger by the people of Kerala, not only because justice had finally arrived, but also because it had come too late. 28 years is too long to wait for justice for a deceased person. During those nearly 3 decades, Sister Abhaya's parents, Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Leelama, lived in torment, pain, and a desire to find the truth. They sent dozens of letters, knocked on the doors of agencies and organizations, but all returned in silence. The death of their only daughter left them without hope. Her mother passed away in 2008 in grief, carrying with her the belief that her daughter did not commit suicide. The old father lives quietly in a remote countryside, going to church every year to pray, hoping that his daughter's soul will rest in peace even though justice has not yet been served. No place, not even religion, is immune to evil. Justice may be late, but it cannot be silenced forever. And sometimes the bravest person is not the great hero, but the thief who dares to speak the truth in a world that turns a blind eye. Sister Abhaya is dead, but the truth about her, at last, lives on. And that is the greatest victory of justice.